Hey guys, Jay Hoy here. Before this video gets started, we've been making it a mission recently to let you guys know that over 90% of you guys are not subscribed to my channel. So if you guys are enjoying what you're seeing, or if it's your first time here, welcome. Make sure you go down below, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications so you never miss an upload, and always you can change your mind later. But with the stage 3 groups unveiled today, we gotta make a preview video with some updated power rankings. What's on, guys? Jay Hoy back with you today. Welcome back to Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. We got some great public match gameplay for you today, but we go on an absolute frying spree. So I hope you guys do enjoy that in the background. As in the intro, I said what we're talking about today. The CDL has unveiled their stage 3 groups, and I want to give a power rankings update as well. So we recapped the stage 2 major, but with stage 3 upon us, I can't wait to see these teams play once again. So let's start with the new groups for stage 3. Afterwards, we'll get into the power rankings. So headlining Group A, and I feel like we haven't said any other team but Atlanta Faze in this one. However, with losing the event, or I should say the major, that means Atlanta goes over Group B. In Group A though, Toronto Ultra, I guess if you want to call it, headlining this group as our first team. And our second team, the Dallas Empire. Third team, Minnesota Rokkr. Fourth team, the Florida Mutineers. Fifth team, the Paris Legion, and rounding them all up, the Los Angeles Guerrillas. So a very strong, I would say very strong Group A. If you look at these teams just at a glance, you would see that there's probably 3 or 4 teams in this group that could possibly finish in that top 3. So you have Toronto, who had a very good run at the major that we'll get into later. Dallas has been looking like a top team all year long. Minnesota has their new team that has looked really good since they made that change. You have Florida, who made a roster change that we'll get into later. Paris, they made a roster change that we'll get into later as well. And then the Los Angeles Guerrillas, who, you know, looked decent in a couple matches, but then we'll get into their losses and how they're doing since then. So, you know, I would say 5 teams have a chance realistically at making some noise in this group. I don't think LA will, but we'll jump over to Group B, give you guys a quick rundown on this group. So we have Atlanta Faze, which is, you know, arguably our best team in the game. Then we have OpTic Chicago. So great, we get to see these guys play again. The Los Angeles Thieves with their new roster, we'll get into that one. The New York Subliners with their new roster, we'll again get into all these later. The Seattle Surge, who look to be semi-improved. And then we have our probably worst team in the league, the London Royal Ravens. So a very interesting group. Once again, I think we probably have 4 teams in this one that actually have a chance to win this group. Atlanta, OpTic, LA Thieves, and New York being those 4. And like I said, lots of roster changes going into this one. If I want to give some early game predictions, I don't think Toronto continues their hot streak. Honestly, I think either Dallas or Minnesota will get number 1. Whichever one of those two doesn't get number 1 will finish number 2. Toronto probably in that 3rd spot. And then whichever new team out of Florida and Paris comes out stronger and wins you know, their key matchups, they'll finish in 4th. The other team will finish 5th. Probably Los Angeles Guerrillas in 6th. just as a quick prediction without breaking down, you know, their actual matchups with their schedule that I'll get into later on. If I wanted to predict Group B though, I mean, obviously Atlanta has looked like our #1 team. OpTic Chicago had a very rough stage 2. LA Thieves with their new roster, you know, will this team be everything they were at the major? Subliners with a new roster, are they going to look good? We'll have to wait and find out. Seattle have looked a little bit improved, but still are at the bottom of the league. And then London, have they done enough to get off the bottom of the league? Probably not. So if I wanted to give a prediction, I would probably go Atlanta #1, OpTic #2. Whoever wins the matchup between LA Thieves and New York will get 3rd. Other one will get 4th. Probably Seattle in 5th, and then London, I hate to break it to you, but you're still just not a good team. So probably London in last. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. But as far as power rankings go, now I didn't put this exactly in the order that the standings are. So I'm not just reading the standings like, oh, since this team's in 4th place, they're 4th on my leaderboard. That's not the case. Before you ask. So, but let's start at the bottom of the list as usual. So first off, or I guess 12th off, we have the London Royal Ravens. I mean, if we're kind of jumping back to the major, they only had 1 match. They lose versus the LA Thieves. Not much to really talk about as far as London. You know, this team hasn't been good all year. And, you know, I was definitely wrong when I predicted this team to be, you know, fighting for the top 6. And, yeah, not much to say about these guys. These guys still suck. They're going to have to do a lot in this group in order to be considered as a decent team. And London stays at our #12 spot from last time. Up in 11th place is the Paris Legion. Now, why did I put this team down here? Well, they're making a roster change, right? We talked about it earlier, didn't really mention who it was, but at the major, these guys only had 1 match. They lose against the Los Angeles Thieves. So again, not much sample size from Paris from the major. So going into stage 3, they changed around their roster. So they minus Fire from their roster, one of their young talents, if you will. He has been full released from the org, which was kind of weird. I would predict him to either go down to a substitute spot, and I don't think they have a academy roster, but, you know, very surprised that they would just give him up completely. I know with the addition of Temp, who's going to be in there from the LA Thieves, that they should look a little bit better as far as roles go. I mean, Aqua would be the main AR. Then you have what, Classic, and you'd have Classic and Scraps as the other 2 player. So I think Scraps would be running a second AR and Temp would run a sub, I believe, or Scraps would run a sub and Temp would run that flex. Not exactly sure what the roles are going to be. We'll have to wait and see what that one is. But Paris, -1 on the power rankings. You know, they didn't really perform at all during the major, didn't win a map, and they're going into stage 3 with a new roster. Up in 10th place is the Seattle Surge. Now, we bumped these guys up just a hair only because they won a game at the major, right? These guys beat Florida in the 3-1, but then they lose versus OpTic Chicago 1-3. So, you know, still not much shown by Seattle. They're still not good, and they're still one of the worst teams in the league. But the only reason I put them above Paris is because they won a match, they won a map, and then they lose versus a tough team. So again, not much to say about Seattle, but hopefully, you know, in Group B, they have a very tough time. Lots of good teams there. You know, they should secure themselves above London, but still not very good. Up in 9th place, we put the LA Guerrillas, and we actually have these guys -2 on the power rankings board. So once again, these guys only had 1 match. They lose versus the Florida Mutineers. So out of all teams that didn't make a roster change, this team should have. You know, if you ask me, this team is not good, right? You have Silly, you have Vivid. But other than that, you have 2 players that are not performing. Apathy and Assault. These guys desperately need a roster change. Now, they need a better main AR, right? Assault just isn't it. You have lots of good young talent coming in the challenger scene. You have Slasher, who's on the bench right now for LA Thieves. Then you have lots of good young talent that could match up with Vivid. You know, lots of good old teammates he probably has some chemistry with. You know, they have Mental on the bench coming over from the Gears scene, who I'd love to see get a chance, especially since these guys still suck. You know, they have a full academy roster that they could bring in players from, but this team needs to do something now, right? We're approaching, I would say, I would say after stage 3, it would be, or middle, halfway to stage 3 is the middle point of the year, right? These guys haven't been good. You know, they did beat Atlanta, but again, that was just a complete fluke day, right? They sucked otherwise, and this team needs to make a roster change, right? I would say get rid of Apathy, get rid of Assault, get a better main AR, get someone from the challenger scene, or someone that Vivid is gonna have really good chemistry with, because this team is not good and you need to make a change in order for this team to do anything. Up in 8th place is the Florida Mutineers themselves. Now we have -2 on these guys as well. So they beat the Los Angeles Guerrillas, then they lose to Seattle, the one team that they seem to not be able to beat. So, you know, again, not much to show from the major, but what are these guys doing going into stage 3? Well, they make a roster change once again, right? The bottom teams seem to be making a roster change. They're thinking, hey, we need to do something, and this is what they decided to do. So they end up benching Slacked for Havoc. Now, if you remember, Havoc was on this roster before, right? This was early on where they put Neptune in place of Havoc, and they just haven't been there. And like realistically, they just haven't been good. So you have a new roster of Skies. Of Skies, you have Awakening as your, I guess, 2 ARs, and now you have Havoc and Neptune as your 2 subs. So once again, these guys, I mean, they obviously could get worse, but they currently sit 9th overall in the standings, and you know, they're not really that great. So they're testing it out, right? They make the easy 1-for-1 swap. Havoc was on the bench for them, playing in challengers in the meantime. So you know, will this team get better with Havoc back in the lineup? We'll see. But if this team doesn't perform, I could easily see these guys making another change, right? Maybe they swap out Havoc, maybe they swap out Neptune, you know, maybe they do something, because Skies and Awakening seem to have earned their spot in this lineup. Up in 7th place is our Minnesota Rokkr squad. Now these guys came off a very hot stage 2. They lose versus Dallas in the winners round 2. They then beat OpTic Chicago in a heartbreaking game for OpTic. Then they lose to the red hot Toronto Ultra squad 1-3. So, you know, they beat OpTic, which is big, right? They beat them in stage 2, but of course that was when they just made the roster change with Standy. And then they lose versus Dallas, who's always been a very close matchup to them. And then they lose versus a team that was absolutely red hot in this last tournament. So, you know, hard to say, you know, what that really means going forward. But this is where you put all of your doubters away, right? You quiet your doubters down. You need to have a consistent stage 3. I think this team, I think Dallas, like I said earlier, Dallas and Minnesota should be the top 2 teams in this division, or I guess in this group. You know, will Toronto continue that on? We'll talk about them in a minute, but I think Minnesota either finishes 4-1 or 3-2. I don't feel like they're going to lose against Florida, Paris, or LAG. It's all about how they're going to play versus the top teams, right? Consider Toronto and Dallas as your 2 toughest opponents in this group. Then you got to do well against them, right? They've always been close versus Dallas. You know, obviously Toronto had a big stage 2, at least at the event. And we'll see, is this new roster it? Can they stay consistent? Will this be the stage that they show that they are a top 4 team? Will they be a top 6 team? We'll have to see. Can they stay consistent? Up in 6th place in our power rankings here, +2 on these guys, is the LA Thieves. Now this team gets put in Group B with Atlanta, OpTic, and New York. So LA Thieves is now Kenny, TJ Haley, Draza, and Venom. So this team is very young. They have a player in Kenny who used to be argued as the best submachine gun in the game, but now is running the main AR role. And, you know, I don't really understand why they did the roster change. I know, obviously, Draza was doing well in challengers, but you dropped Slasher down to the bench. So, will this be the team that moves this team forward? I don't know. Will they crack under pressure? They have a lot to prove in this one. As long as they beat Seattle and London, I think they either go 2-3 or 3-2. Depending on how they face off versus New York. So, will this team be much of anything? I mean, from the major, they beat Paris 3-0. They beat London in the game 5. They beat New York in the game 5. And then they lost to Toronto. So, all this team needs to do is beat Seattle, beat London, and beat New York. And I think they would consider themselves to be a top 6 team going forward. Up in 5th place is going to be the New York Subliners. Now, it may be kind of surprising why I put these guys so high. But coming off from stage 2, right? They go, what, 4-1 overall. They only lost to Atlanta, but then they come into this event and you don't really see too much from them, right? They get 3-0'd by Dallas in the first round. They then lose to the LA Thieves in the game 5. You know, not really much to show from New York in this one, right? 0-2 overall. What would it be? 2-6 map counts. So, you know, there is a roster change that hasn't been 100% confirmed yet, but it kind of looks likely since Mac has been playing with a Challengers team and Hydra wasn't seen on the Subliners Academy team. So it kind of seems like they're adding in Hydra to their starting lineup and moving Mac down to their academy roster. So will this be, you know, the best move for them? I don't know. Obviously, Hydra, a very promising player from France. Now, will he be able to come over and be what they want him to be? I think, you know, this has a lot to do with, can this team stay playing good against the tough teams, right? They have Atlanta, OpTic, and LA Thieves as the 3 biggest, you know, opponents. I think they definitely could beat the LA Thieves. I think they'll beat Seattle. I think they'll beat London. Will they beat Atlanta? Will they beat Chicago? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it all depends on how Hydra plays. If he can come over, make an instant impact, I think this team will be okay. I think maybe they'll finish 2-3 in the group, maybe 3-2, depending on how that match goes versus the LA Thieves. And will this roster change prove to be much, or will they kind of revert back to their old squad with Mac? We'll have to wait and find out, but New York -2 in the power rankings. Up in 4th place, the hottest team in stage 2, the Toronto Ultra. These guys move up 5 spots on my power rankings, right? They won the stage 2 major, but the road to get there. They beat OpTic Chicago 3-1. They then lose versus Atlanta. I didn't write down the number, but I think it was a 3-1 in favor of Atlanta there. They then beat the LA Thieves 3-0. They beat Minnesota 3-1. They beat Dallas 3-1. And then they beat Atlanta in the grand finals 5-3 in that best of 9. So what do we predict from these guys? I don't really know, because, you know, they weren't showing much up until that event. So, you know, they have a chance to get top 3 in this group. I would say definitely a chance to get top 3, but they have to show that stage 3, or I should say that they have to show that stage 2 wasn't a fluke, right? They have to show that the major run was not a fluke, right? They have 2 teams that they beat in their group, right? Minnesota and Dallas. Can they do it again? Can they stay consistent? That's going to be the huge challenge for Toronto. Can they prove themselves? Can they be the team that they were at the stage 2 major? And will this team be the same team exiting the stage 2 major as they will enter stage 3? So Lots of question marks around Toronto, but +5 on the power rankings gives these guys a really good shot. Up in our top 3 in 3rd place is OpTic Chicago. Now, yes, I moved these guys up 1 spot, and the only reason I did that was because these guys had a really tough stage 2. And, you know, why would you put them up a spot? Well, you know, they come off beating Dallas, then they lose against Toronto, which, you know, Toronto was red hot this entire tournament. They then beat Seattle 3-1, and then they lose a very big, heartbreaking matchup versus Minnesota that if that match happened again, they would win, I would say, 9 out of 10 times. So a very, you know, not consistent showing from them in stage 2. You know, 3-2 overall in the group. You know, they had a very rough week 2 of stage 2. And now with Atlanta in this group, I think that will be the battle for the top. You know, we'll talk about LA Thieves and New York as the, you know, 3rd and 4th place teams, but I think either of those teams could upset either of the top 2. And we talked about it earlier. I think OpTic's still number 2 in this group. I think somehow they'll rebound. They need to fix whatever they need to do to get where they want to be. And OpTic's always been a team that if they're struggling in a certain game mode, they put a lot of their focus on that, and then something else starts to fall off. So typically they're always a really good hardpoint and control team, or, you know, that 3rd game mode, in this case being control. They always are a really good respawn team, but then their search and destroy suffers. But then once they get good at search, then their hardpoint or control suffers. And we'll see, right? Can they rebound from a really tough stage 2? Can everyone regain? Can they come back and show that they're one of the best teams in the game? I think this group will prove that so. And in 2nd place is our Dallas Empire. These guys still look really good, and I hate to just be so boring about them, but these guys just are kind of holding consistent, right? They beat the New York Subliners in round 1. I think that was a 3-0. They beat Minnesota in a game 5. They then lose to Atlanta in a game 4, I believe. Then they lose to Toronto in the losers finals. So, you know, Atlanta and Toronto was their biggest matchups. Well, those are the 2 teams that kind of finished, you know, ahead of them. So, you know, they still look good. They still look like a dominant team, winning majority of their matches. Now, can they show to be that top team? They definitely have a chance to do it in Group A here, you know, with Toronto's hot run there, and with Minnesota always giving them a tough matchup. And of course, no question who's in 1st place in our power rankings. It's Atlanta Faze. No question about it. They go 2-0 before the grand finals. They go 6-2 map count. Then they go to the grand finals and lose versus that red hot Toronto squad in the game 8. And that sounds very weird, but they lose 3-5. Now, everyone could be considered, oh, maybe it was another off day. Well, Toronto just came out really hot. They came out, you know, matching them and everything. So I still feel like they're the best team in the game. They haven't lost much at all. And Atlanta definitely has a chance to be at the top of Group B. So as we wrap this video up, the current standings are on your screen now. You know, it's pretty straightforward, kind of similar to the power rankings themselves. And we got lots to look forward to, lots of good storylines entering stage 3. But with all that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, hit that like button down below. Let me know of your thoughts and comments down there in that comment section. And if you haven't yet, or if you're brand new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. You can always change your mind later. And with all that being said, guys, we'll see you next one.